This is January 24th, 1992. The following interview is with Senator Norma Daniels. Here, I'll make sure everything's moving, so it must be working. First, I'm going to ask you just some kind of general questions about your elections and other things. And if you feel like you don't want to answer or whatever, or want to back up and erase the tape, we can do whatever you want to do with this information.
Okay.
Oh.
And this will only center on my elected staff here.
Yes, mainly. But you can answer.
I was in
Sure.
elected government.
Oh, well, I'm going to want to ask you about that,
too.
Okay.
Yeah.
What years have you served in the Kansas House or Senate? You're in the Senate, so I assume you've been there the whole time.
I was elected in 1980. I took my first oath of office in 81, again in 80, elected again in 84, elected again in 88.
Okay, then you were one of the group of women that sort of started the change in the Senate, because prior to your election, there'd only been one woman at a time ever in the Kansas Senate.
I'd like to make a comment on that. Jan Myers was here. However, Nancy Parrish, Senator Nancy Parrish, was appointed to fill her husband's term of office.
Do you remember what month that was that she was appointed?
I don't remember.
Jan couldn't remember either. We're still trying. We forgot to ask her that when we interviewed
catch her before she gets appointed a judge.
Yeah, we'll have to do that to track that down. True, she was. But
I don't believe it was very many months. I think he may have resigned after the session ended in April.
80. Yeah.
Yeah. April of 80, and then I believe as the incumbent, she was appointed, then she ran.
Well, that's what I remember, but
she'll tell you exactly.
Yeah, we hadn't interviewed her yet, so
if that,
do that.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Okay. If that crinkling bothers you, I have a problem with the sole of my foot. I have a nerve that's it stings every 15 seconds like a bee sting right now. It just started again. And so I have to pack it nice. So I've got an ice bag down there that's
good.
crunchy.
I don't think that'll pick it up.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's too bad. I'm sorry.
It happens. It'll go away in a couple of hours. Every 15 seconds gets a bit much.
Oh, yeah. That's awful.
Okay.
Prior to that, did you serve in public office?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Where did you serve and what office?
I served on the city council of the second-class city called Valley Center, Kansas, right outside Wichita. And I served. I was elected in the spring of '75. I was re-elected in the spring of '79 and served almost 2 years. I think the elections are in April. So I actually resigned when I came up here to take office in '81. So it was a couple of months short of 6 years.
Okay. Now, when did you affiliate with the party, and what made you decide?
I've always been a Democrat.
You've always been a Democrat.
My family was.
So you just registered that way when you first
sure
registered to vote. Okay. Do you think was it influence from your family, or just because
I think the philosophy. I think I like the philosophy of it. I've always seen the two parties a little different.
Can you describe your election the first time you were elected to office? Here. Yeah, in the Senate here.
In the Senate. Let me ask you what part of that.
Okay, well let's just start. Well, let's just trace it on through chronologically. When did you file for office, and what influenced you to file for office for the Senate?
Okay. I filed for office, and I believe it was 2 days before the filing deadline.
Okay.
While I was on city council as an elected public official there, I was the first woman in 65 years to serve on that city council, on that government. And during that time, I really did a lot of homework, and therefore I was appointed to a lot of boards and commissions and task forces, both county-wide and statewide.
I see.
And so I got to know a lot of people, and by attending all the seminars that I could get my hands on at my own expense, I met a lot of people, and the intellectual challenge was just so stimulating to me to start learning all these new things. I might tell you whatever you want to do with it. I am the mother. My husband and I have 7 children, and we had them in 9 years. So I had 9 pregnancies in 10 years, and we lost 2 of them. But we have 7 live children, 6 daughters and 1 son, all quite close together. And so I was the full-time mother and homemaker. I am a registered nurse and retained my registration in Kansas. And throughout all those years, and then when my youngest, the kids were in school, and my husband, oh gosh, I'm getting off on my city council, how I first got into politics. Maybe you're going to ask that later.
That's okay, I'll ask that later, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, I had been critically ill, and in the hospital for quite some time, and had come home, and I was recuperating, getting my strength back and everything, and doing pretty good. It was in February, I believe, first part of February, and my husband and I were sitting, kids were all in school, drinking a cup of tea, and talking about a lot of things, and all of a sudden, out of the clear blue sky, he said, Norma, you really do have a lot of talent. You ought to give some to the community. And I was a little taken aback because he's an MD of family practice, and he worked from early morning till late night. I said, well, Bob, I know you've been really busy practicing your profession, but I have been Girl Scout leader, Boy Scout leader. I've been homeroom mother for 5, 6, 7 kids. I've been, PTA. I have been in every organization because of the kids there is. So I have been giving myself to the community. And he said, but I don't mean that. I mean, this city needs a little bit of moral guidance. And think about running for the city council. And I looked at him, and I really was aghast because I said, Bob, city council is politics, and don't you ever talk to me about that dirty game of politics. Now, how many people really feel that way today? A lot of people feel that way. And he looked at me, and he didn't say another word. We went on talking about other things. He dropped it.
Oh, for Pete's sake.
And I was a little taken back. I thought, me and government, no way. But about a couple of weeks later, I was getting out for my first couple of times around town, and I went up to the city hall to pay our water bill. And there was a little gentleman in there who was just ready to retire. And George had been a friend of ours for many years since we moved to the community. And so I was up front paying my water bill, and he heard my voice, so he came up and talked to me. And you have to remember the context of time here. He was 65 then. And he came out, we were talking about putting our gardens in. And we both loved to garden. And all of a sudden, I mean all of a sudden, without any conscious thought on my part, this voice came out of my mouth and said, George, what do you have to do to file for city council? And I want you to know that I am basically a very, very shy person. I mean, I would be in a room full of women I'd known for 10 years and not say a word the whole afternoon, but thoroughly enjoy it. And with that, he crossed his arms and he stepped back and he said, why? Who wants to? And I was intimidated. I remember looking down to the floor and backing towards the door to get out of the building. And he said, certainly not you, Norma. And that got a little, I thought, oh, wait a minute. And I said, well, George, why not? Is there a law against women serving in city government here? That's how little I knew about government. Is there a law against it? And he said, well, no, Norma. It's just that city government is just like big business, and women don't understand big business. Now, if you think back 18, 20 years ago of a man that's 65 years old, you'll understand why he said it. And with that, something happened, and I said, George, where do I sign? I went right back and filed. I mean, you know.
Wonderful.
And on the way home, I put my money down where I filed for office.
Oh my goodness.
And on the way home, I thought, gosh, what have I done?
Oh.
I don't know anything about government. I don't know anything about a city council. Oh my gosh, it took me 3 days to tell my husband.
You didn't tell him?
No. And he was absolutely delighted when I told him. He said, I was so hoping you'd do that. And
now what year was that?
that was in 75.
75.
And then you see in April,
Yeah.
we had a primary. There were 8 people in the primary.
Oh my gosh.
I got them narrowed down to 2, and then I won the primary.
Hmm.
I mean the general election, and took office. And boy, did I do homework, and did I attend seminars, and I was scrambling for give me some of this knowledge. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it the very best I can. I became a real student of government, and that's the way
In
I
15 years.
first
Yeah.
got into government. And then after 6 years on the city council, the last year before I ran for the Senate in '80, I had received comments at seminars at the League of Kansas Municipalities. People would say, are you going to run for the Senate? They never asked me, never had one person ask me if I would run for the House, or was I going to run for the House. And I kept saying, oh, no, I'm a home person. I'm going to stay in my own community. That's where I belong. But people just kept saying things like that. And finally, one person that I knew had been in government for many, many years, I said, I keep getting these little postcards in the mail, these little letters in the mail asking me if I would consider, asking me if I was going to. No. I said, I don't know. I said, it's something I haven't done. And I asked this person, I said, do you think I'd be ready for that? And he said, you're more ready right now than most of them who are elected. So I talked it over with my husband, and I said, how would you feel? Me gone. So much. And he said, Norma, that's a decision you alone can make. You've got to do what you feel is the right thing for you to do. And I said, well, Bob, you're important to me. I want to know how you feel about it. He said, it's up to you to make that decision. He would not tell me. And so 2 days before the election, I told him I was going to come up and file. He says, I'm going to be there with you. He says, I am so happy.
Oh, that's
and yet
great.
he told me later he knew I didn't have a chance of being elected.
Oh, he did?
Yes, later. But he was my biggest cheerleader. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh,
And-
for goodness sakes. That's exciting though, really.
And because I ran against the senior member of the Senate, he was a
Who
millionaire,
did you run against?
Wes Sowers.
Okay, yeah, I remember.
And he was a millionaire, and he was well-rooted in all the chamber and everybody in Wichita, and I was the unknown. And I had a primary, and got through that, and then went into the general, and everybody laughed, they thought it was crazy. But I did door-to-door, and I did it in areas where I had no contact before. I didn't do it in my hometown.
You just went
People
to...
knew me then. They either liked me or they didn't like me. And I won by 165 votes. And then he asked for a recount, and we recounted the city of Sedgwick, which is in Harvey County. And I picked up, I think it was 8 or 10 more votes, I don't know. But it was a small margin that I won.
Well, you said you went door to door. What other type of campaigning? Did you use the media at all? Did you...
I couldn't afford it. at that time. I had no contributors except just individual people.
Okay.
And
So fundraising was a problem.
well, and I didn't do very much fundraising, see. I used mostly just grassroots. And people came forward to help me who knew me, and I will say I've had very, very little, almost nil support from the party. They have not helped me. They, at least in the usual helping ways. There may be individuals out there who helped me, but
not as a party.
oh, no. And so
that's interesting.
Just
well,
really,
has fundraising become easier, or have you done more in your subsequent elections?
I don't spend a whole lot of time fundraising. I see some of my colleagues are all, we're already in, fundraising parties and stuff. But my people are people who could afford to give maybe $5, $10, maybe $20 once in a while. If I get a check for $50, I mean, that's like a gold mine to me. So, and of course, the groups of people really support me. I mean, the PACs, but they would support me anyway, whether it was PAC or not. The nurses support me, the teachers support me, the people in the working class just support me.
Well, did you receive encouragement, you said, from your husband? Who are the other individuals? Or were they men or women or relatives? Or
well, the one who finally tipped the scales was a man, really.
That's interesting.
The kids, my family just said, "Mom, go for it. Mom,
Did they?
you can do it."
How old were they at that? When you ran for the
Well,
Senate?
I ran for the Senate. My first session up here, my youngest daughter was in her last semester of her junior year in high school.
Okay.
And my son was, he's next to the youngest, he was in his last semester of high school.
So they were really just about out of the home.
Yes.
And how old were you?
When I filed, I was 49 when I filed, which was nice because I filed in July. I was 50. And everybody accused me of lying, and I said, look at my birthday. When I filed, I was 49.
Yeah. Well, it seems like maybe there's sort of trends in that maybe this year particularly or last year there were more younger. I mean, the women were about 37 seemed to be the median age, which is maybe the Senate's different too, though. In your next elections, did you have hard races or?
I've had terrible hard races the whole time. Yes, I have. In my first Senate election, I had a opposition in the primary who had been in the state hospital multiple times and had a criminal list about this long, and he conducted a very erratic type of campaign where he went door to door and told people my kids were all on drugs and my husband was a drunkard and that kind of thing. Of course, nobody really, they thought nobody knew me, but my husband has an awful lot of contacts, but we're more or less the shy, stay-at-home type, both of us are, but we still have a lot of contacts. And that made it kind of difficult because I had attorneys calling me, telling me, don't stand next to your opponent at any kind of a meeting or a rally, and do not let him into your home.
Oh my gosh.
And he is somewhat dangerous and violent. And
That's
so
frightening.
that was the primary, and then first West Sowers was my general. I was elected there, and then in '84 the lobbyist from Wichita that represented Wichita ran against me. And I had a primary that year. Another young girl from Wichita who was good friends with this first opponent who had some mental problems. She ran against me, and she was one of those with the high-heeled type jeans, sling big bag, and the chewing gum. And then the lobbyist, of course, was in the general election, and it was kind of funny because the Republican candidate lobbyist who was representing Wichita, his name was well known. She was a Republican, and she stood for, she wanted more alcohol, or open up the, drinking laws. She was in favor of abortion, and she wanted gambling opened up in the state, which are traditionally three things that are not Republican platform. And I was on just exactly the opposite side on all three issues. I mean, and I think at that time I had like 2,500 more registered Republicans in my districts than Democrats.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was very interesting. And so I won that election. And then
let me. There were three women. You're saying in your primary you had another.
I had a woman in the primary.
And a woman
me.
in the general. So,
and the woman so there were three women.
Well, that's unusual. I don't believe we've run across that before. Where there were three, where there were at all levels of the election process.
That was in '84, and then in '88, I was told by the other party that I was the most targeted Democrat in the state by the state Republican Party. They wanted that seat back. And so they really pulled out all the stops. They ran an attorney who lived in Eastboro, which is a very ultra-up area, whose name was Davy Crockett. Good name recognition, fast talker. He'd represented real estate for years and years, and so every vacant lot that had any real estate he had a sign on all over the city, not just in the district. And he spent $85,000, but never declared a sign, of which he had almost 1,000 signs out there. He never declared any of them on his expenses. So, and that race was won. I won that one this last time. But I will say this, even though the Republican Party targeted me, and they sent many of the, they told all the Republican senators they were going to have to go down and campaign against me in my district. I've had 5 of them come up and tell me that they refused to go because I had been a real working colleague in the Senate.
How interesting.
And that they felt that I had not played political games, but done the work. And I mean, if I believed if that was where they were taking, and I believed that was the right thing, I had no problem with voting that way.
That's quite a
so that to me that was a real compliment. And the others did not campaign visibly if they were down there campaigning. No one ever told me they saw one, but these 5 did tell me that they just wanted me to know that they refused to take part in anything like that.
How did the media treat you? Did they endorse you in any of these?
The first time in '80, the Eagle and Beacon, after my interview, said that they were going to endorse my opponent, and I had told them during the interview, I said, I know you have to endorse my opponent, but I'm here and I'll be glad to answer your questions, and I think that possibly even, and they got a little upset when I said, I know you have to endorse your opponent. They said, why do we have to do that? And I said, because it buys advertising in your paper and I don't. And they started laughing. They said, well, you're a candidate. But I said, he's the incumbent. I said, I know you usually endorse incumbents. But they did put in there that after they said all the things, and they were very nice, they said, she's knowledgeable about this and this and this and this, and she's a rising star on the political horizon.
Oh, that's really nice.
And I thought that that was better than the endorsement, because people say when you get an endorsement, that's the death toll for you.
Sort of true too, I think.
So then, of course, after I was the incumbent, then they continued to endorse me.
Do you know of any close relative or friend in either you or your husband's families that was in the House or the Senate before you used it? Okay.
Well, a friend, yes, but no relative.
Okay. A close friend? Or?
Very close.
Okay.
My next-door neighbor served in the House of Representatives and was chairman of the Public Health and Welfare Committee. His name was George White, and they're very, very dear friends.
Oh.
He was the druggist who was in Valley Center when my husband finished his internship and looked for a small town to set up practice. And he was the one that opened the doors and we want you, we need you, and ended up we built next door to each other.
Do you think he had any influence on your decision, or maybe
no,
indirectly?
I don't think so. He did bring my kids up here to Page. You know, he gave them that opportunity, and they were delighted. But I believe it was probably, when I was in city council, Wichita was a big city, and it was getting laws passed that benefited it, but just absolutely dissipated the smaller communities that didn't have the big batteries of attorneys and all the staff and everything. And so I organized what we call ALARM, which stood for the Association for Legislative Action of Rural Mayors.
Oh, that's interesting.
And the 19 small cities, I got them organized. Their mayors and their council people want to come, their fire chiefs, their police chiefs, all of that is legislation. And we would meet every other Saturday, and we would ask our legislators while they were in session to come for an hour or so and talk with us about legislation that seemed to be moving so we could have some input.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now, this is why you were on the city council?
Yes, and I organized that in 1975, the fall of 75. And when we had input then, I had volunteered to come up and talk to the committee about the impact of proposed legislation on our small communities in Sedgwick County. So I became, and then I would sit and watch the process. And then I thought, well, I don't think I want to do that. And at first you think, oh gosh, I could never do that. That's the first thing. And then it became just a little more comfortable, and there were more and more of the senators that would, and the House members too, that would come up and talk to me. After a couple of times they'd see me in the hall, they'd pass and say hi. That organization is still going today.
Well, that's wonderful.
Probably 75 until 92.
To the communities.
So
now you're the senator who they meet with and lobby you.
Sometimes I don't always get there, but anyway, we did have a good turnout of the legislators.
Well, I think that's important to note that. That's maybe something women do sometimes, and it seems like several of you have been in the local government before, elected officials in local government before coming here, and have done things, innovative things like that. It's important. Now, we talked about local government type issues and small community issues. What other issues have been important in your campaigns and also to you as far as introducing and supporting legislation here while you've been here?
Well, I think most of those issues that I have in the campaigns, let's just start with campaigns.
Yeah.
In campaigns, there are a lot of issues that people really hang their hat on. They want to meet you, they want to know what you look like, and they either like you or they don't like you. And when I first ran the first time, lots of groups wanted to talk with me, and I stand against the death penalty. And of course, it's a very hot issue, and I was told and advised, don't even talk about it. Don't tell them what your stand is. Don't tell them what your stand is. And I said, I don't believe I can do that. And so when I was asked, I simply said, I am opposed to the death penalty at this time. I believe that there are better alternatives to dealing with those heavy crime problems, and I think that we need to look at them because down deep inside I feel that violence breeds violence, and that's what the death penalty is. I said, but I think at this time we really had ought to talk about one of the critical issues facing us today in the present time right now, which is either water, or education, or this, that, and the other thing. And I put probably 5 or 6 on one of my brochures that I sent out. I only sent out 2 mailings. In the primary, if I had opposition, I would send a mailing to the registered Democrats. Then in the general election, I would send a brochure, 1 mailing to all registered voters. That's it, just the 2. And my other contact was either in groups or door to door. But the issues really didn't matter
at that point. Well, did they, after you, were your constituents concerned about the issues after you became elected?
No, they became interested in issues as they rose in the legislature and as the news media would present them.
It wasn't initiated there.
It's a different. No, it really isn't. Several years ago, I took on doing a lot of worked on about 3 years on the transportation of hazardous materials. Got a lot of background information on that, and I had the full cooperation of the research department during the summertime. Did an awful lot on that. Got it over to the House, passed the Senate twice, got it over to the House, and Kerry Patrick, a representative, would table it every time because he'd find some reason that there wasn't something in there, even though research and the 7 agencies, state agencies that involved it, had all agreed on what I was introducing. So that, after 2 times, I thought, well, okay, let it rest, because now it's becoming a sore point, picky point. And I also had done a lot of work on, since I was on federal and state affairs, I'd done an awful lot of work on the need for, in the prison criminal justice system, having a comprehensive criminal justice planning commission that would look at everything that impacted our.
Now it is. Maybe one of my batteries is loose. Okay, it's going now. Let's back up and talk about that bill. What year was it you were working on that?
Golly, it must have been in, I would say, I have to go back. It was during Governor Carlin's administration.
And he was the one that vetoed it?
Yes.
And never told you. I mean, you were working with
no
his
communication,
office.
and I did communicate with his office frequently about it. And
then this came up again.
then another name for it, which was the Sentencing Commission.
Frank gets up and says that.
Frank gets up and he says, by the way, this is the bill. This is Senator Daniels' bill, Senator Daniels introduced this concept several years ago, and he says, we just took the bill off the shelf and blew the dust off of it, and he said, built on it a little bit, took the comprehensive out and just narrowed it down to the sentencing part.
I see.
And he says, but that is the basis for it. And so, and he went on. And of course it passed. And we're getting ready to hear it. It's been a couple of years. I think a year and a half or 2 years the Sentencing Commission has been working, coming up with recommendations. So anyway, that was another one that I felt maybe a woman before her time, or thoughts before her time, or something. And then another one that I did a lot of work on, since I represent Wichita State U in my district, and was concerned about the condition of some of our state university libraries. My kids have all gone to K-State. This employment library is atrocious. Back issues, and you can't get a periodical more recent than 5 or 6 years ago. And so I did a lot of work and did a lot of money, financial figuring, fiscal figuring, on how to get some more money into the university systems for library acquisitions, classroom equipment, and it would not provide for any building. Didn't address salaries. It was for teaching tools and students' advantages. And my provision was to float $100 million worth of bonds. State to float those bonds to the new Kansas Development Finance Authority. That's their purpose, for a lower rate of interest, and distribute that money per pupil head count, so the population meant something in distribution, and that was the hard part. Only a certain amount of it carry the rest in investments, so that you would accrue the interest to start that unspent. As long as the federal government relied on, at that time I believe it was either 3 or 4 years. And by an increase in fees, I think it was a 1 or 2% fee increase of the students, we would have them paid off in like 12 years instead of 20 years. Well, Ways and Means had, I think, 5 or 6 hours of hearings on that, but it was at the end of the session, and then it laid over and the session was over. In the meantime, the Board of Regents wouldn't talk on it. It hadn't been their idea. 2 years later, they came back with this margin of excellence idea to have the money used for the teachers' salaries, and then not fairly, of course. Only those that brought in money grants got them. So anyway, I asked the person I'd worked with, who was very supportive of my concept to begin with, and all the way through, that was with the Board of Regents, and when the margin of excellence came through, and I said, there's parts of this that look so much like my bill. And he said, where do you think the seed came from?
Oh, goodness sake, Sarah again? So maybe you are ahead of the time a little in some of these ideas.
It's just that some of my colleagues on my side are saying, Norma, don't let them take your ideas like that. I said, well, the important thing is that the seed gets planted and gets watered enough that it produces for the people. That is the purpose. It's not personal glory or anything else. It's let's do for the people what needs to be done. And who does it really isn't that important.
Yeah, really it isn't, but it's still.
Yeah, they get kind of aggravated with me, but I know that people do this.
Well, then you described your district just a little bit, but can you tell me what kind of people are they? Rural?
Oh yes,
small town.
I love my district. My district is like a big horseshoe with a tail on it. I have the highest of income in Wichita. I have some of the lowest of income. I have a real pocket of poverty people in the barrios, the north part of Wichita, the Hispanic area, Black and Hispanic. I have the academics of Wichita State U. Many of the professors live not too far from there. They're in my district. And then I have a large area that borders the barrios that is an area of blue-collar workers. In going door to door, those people are good people, but they're undereducated. Maybe have a GED, but they're the people who simply have gone to work and have always worked. And I'm not saying they're not capable of working, they just don't have it. Then I have all the industry of the north part of Wichita, and then I have all of the agriculture clear to the Harvey County line, and clear over to the west to within one township of Reno County. I have 7 small cities, and the bulk of my population is in Wichita, so I have conflicting factors every way around.
It's real diversity in that.
It is, and it's a challenge, and I know every time I vote I'm probably stepping on some group's toes, but you have to do what you have to do.
Yeah, that's interesting. Your district is real interesting. Yeah. If you were going to describe your positions and could put a label on yourself, I don't like labels myself, but just say that you could. Are you a liberal? Are you a conservative? Or where would you place yourself on a political spectrum?
I think I'm probably a moderate conservative Democrat.
Yeah.
Moderately conservative Democrat.
Good. Now, when you came up here as a freshman, you already knew a lot of people, but did you have a mentor or someone, either in the House or Senate, that kind of helped you?
I had several that helped me, and they were not people that I had known before.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
They were legislators that, in fact, some of my probably most constant mentors were of the other party.
Oh, well, that's interesting. And now, how many women were elected to the Senate the year you were elected?
Jan
was here,
and Nancy was the...
Okay, she was re-elected then.
Well, yeah, she was elected for the first time, but she wasn't elected on her own. Yeah.
Okay.
She was appointed first, and myself. I'm trying to think. That first year, I believe that there was one other Republican woman elected or appointed. Maybe appointed. She was from KU. I'm trying to think of her name. I can see her face so much. Her husband was the administrator of the Spencer Museum.
Just blank.
Huh?
I'm a blank. I can't remember either. I don't think I have my list.
Well, he since went to the Smithsonian in Washington, and she was an attorney. There's a big restaurant named after them. I don't think it's in relation, but over in Lawrence. Gosh, why can't I remember her name? I can see her face so much because there was Nancy and Norma and Jan, and her name started with J. Jan and... Anyway,
let's see.
Who is that? Do you have a list there, maybe?
Yeah, but this is the House. I can't seem to
find the Senate.
Well, that should be the Senate. That wasn't Jayne Eldridge?
Yes.
Jayne Eldridge.
Jan and Jane and Nancy and Norma. They were 2 J's and 2 N's. Jayne Eldridge.
Yeah.
The Eldridge House restaurant.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I got it.
Yeah.
I think she was appointed. Who resigned?
Yeah, I think in 81, wasn't it?
Yeah, somebody resigned. I think it might. No, it couldn't have been.
I can't remember who resigned in 81.
81 or 82.
Was it right after the session was over? In 81?
81 or 82. But she was appointed to fill the term, and then Wint came in after her. Who was in there? Because I know she hadn't gone through an election. She just took out now lost.
I can't think who was in the Senate.
Anyway, I can't either. It was a man.
Yeah.
It was a man. Yeah.
I don't have the list now. I just have the women.
Anyway, that's how it was. I think I've been told by another person that's doing a history on women that I am the first woman Democrat or Democrat woman to ever be elected on her own.
to the Senate.
To the Senate.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
And I know I'm the first one from Sedgwick County, woman from Sedgwick County to ever be elected. So
I'm almost positive too.
I mean, there may be something way back, but I think maybe it was a Republican woman. I think she was appointed.
There were hardly any women, period, in the Senate. You know, that's kind of typical. Yeah. Well, who else is doing the women's history?
Well, let me think of her name. She worked for John Carlin, and her name is Sister Jeanne.
Oh yeah, is she still working?
Well, I don't know whether she is or not because I don't see her very often. She's in the treasurer's office, and she had talked with me maybe 5 years ago and said, I want to sit down and interview you. I said, well, just give me a call. We'll set a time. And she never did.
Oh, she didn't do that. Okay. Well, we're trying to kind of collect these first, too, so we'll be sure we get this down. I'm thinking that's very true that you were.
I think it is.
Well, now, getting back to your election in 80, and I hate to keep...
No, get me back on track.
Pounding on why all of a sudden this changed. Now, see, we went from 1920 clear to 1980, 60 years, and very, very few women in the Senate. Never more than one. And then all of a sudden, well, Nancy was appointed, actually, but we get these elections, and since then, it's been growing by leaps and bounds.
Yes, it has. We've got almost 25% in right now.
Yeah. Can you think of, is there any reason? You were there, so...
I was there, and I don't know. I watched the kind of women that are elected to the Senate. And I have said this to many, many, many of my groups because I think it's a very silent trend. It's silent. But it's there, and it's becoming more constant. And I started noticing it in 82, 83, after I was here. The costs have escalated so much to run for office, especially in the Senate. Ours is a large district. The cost of paper, the cost of postage, the cost of everything has escalated so fast. The pay, see, it costs my husband and probably around somewhere between $2,000 and $4,000 a year for me to be up there. That's not a whole lot, but I could not do this and try to hold a job back home. They have me gone in a hurry. I'll be gone 3 months or 90 days or more than that. And I've told the groups I speak to, this silent trend is that you either have to be independently wealthy or have another source of income, because a man cannot leave his job to come do this and have a family. So they either have to be retired with a good source of income or be a partner in something. And so that leaves, if you look in the Senate, you'll see that those of us who are there have husbands who can afford that extra cost for us to be up here and maintain a second residence and all of this.
That's a good point. I mean, that's very possibly a very strong...
And that's why it's closing out a lot of good candidates out there, because in the first place, it costs to get elected. And boy, with the increase of media during a campaign, and I don't use television because I can't afford it. The one thing I have used are well-placed billboards. You know, a few, not very many.
Even those are very
But
expensive.
people from out of town say, you've got billboards all over that town, and I'm thinking, I have 5 billboards, but they're all on the main drags. And then I hand-painted all my own signs and on the particle board, and refresh them every 4 years, hand done, and get them out so I don't have to rebuy. I couldn't afford
But it really is expensive, and if you were working at a limited time too,
very expensive, and my brochures are not slick, shiny finish. They're a nice finish, but they're not expensive, and they've only got the black and white picture of them.
Okay, what committees were you appointed to after you...
When I was first elected?
I'm sure it's changed over the...
Yes, we change every 4 years. Let's see if I can remember them. local government, federal and state affairs, labor and industry, confirmations. There was another one. Was it elections?
Now, what are you?
Am I on now?
Are there any of the same?
Yes, there are. Now I'm on energy and natural resources. I am on local government, ranking Democrat member. I am on agriculture. I am on federal and state affairs. I am on labor and industry. I am on confirmations, and I am on legislative post-audit, which is one of the very powerful committees. I serve on a large number of boards and commissions. I think I counted them a while back. I think there were either 12 or 13 of them.
Oh my goodness.
So there's a lot of them. Some of them are very heavy, like I'm on K-Tech Board of Directors. And I'm on the Kansas Rural Development Council, which is a presidential initiative out of Washington. And some of those require a lot of time, like post-audit does.
You're on a committee with Dr. Lou Wolf, who I teach with, aren't you? Are you on?
Bill Wolf?
No, Lou, his wife. Let's see, is it? No, maybe not. She on some prisons.
Prison committee. Well, if it's federal and state affairs, where we do an awful lot of prison work. Yeah.
Well, okay, let me ask you this. Did you, have you had any leadership roles?
Any leadership roles? Well,
not much chance.
No, when you're the minority party, you don't get many chances. However, I have one that is a real, I feel, star in my cap. And that is that during my first 4 years on local government, we had a very controversial issue. I'm trying to think exactly what it was, but it went to a conference committee, and the bill had started in the Senate. When Senator Doyen, who was president of the Senate, appointed the conference committee, which is 3 senators, and then the House appoints 3 people, he appointed me as the chairman of the conference committee. That is unheard of, to appoint a minority member as chair of a conference committee and simply put the chairman of the committee as a member. So, and the exciting thing about that is that no one in the Senate, even those that have been here 40 years, could never remember that happening before. As it turned out, the chairman of the House Committee, Ivan Sands, of the House of the Government Committee, thought that he was the chair. And so he called for a public hearing in front of the conference committee. And finally I said, Ivan, you've scheduled this for such and such a time. And I said, as chairman, I wish that you would have talked to me because that's conflicting. And he says, well, I'm chair. I said, Ivan, how can you be chair of a Senate bill conference committee? And he said, oh my gosh. And the notices had already gone out, and we had that. And he says, oh, I'm sorry, I got along great with Ivan. And he was a Republican, and I loved Ivan. But he felt terrible about it. And he said, I've never known this to happen. I've only been here 30 years. So I simply took over and chaired the committee, and afterwards, we handled everything and kept everything calm, and everybody, the people out there, I think it was the annexation of the western part of Topeka.
Oh, yes.
And
that was pretty heated, too.
It was very heated. And afterwards, even some of the people in the room were leaving. They were smiling. They said, well, we got heard. And they came up to me and they said, we really appreciate the way everything went. It went really smooth, and thank you for listening. And all. And one of the legislators that was visiting asked to be heard, and I said, well, if we have some time afterwards, but right now it's the people's turn to talk. And that's what this is scheduled for, and I've got them all scheduled. So if you'll just bear with me, we'll try. If we get finished, I'll certainly want you to, And as I was leaving, it was the next day, in the hallway, I walked into our local government committee a little bit early. The staff was in there, and they came up to me and they said, "We had never seen you chair a committee before, but you handled it like a pro, and that was not easy with that crowd. And we want you to know we're giving you a strong compliment. We're not supposed to do this." You know, that to me,
that makes it all worthwhile.
If I never get to be chairman of a committee,
that's great.
So,
well,
now, first.
did you participate in any of these small group coalitions or whatever you want to call them, like the Women's Coalition that sometimes goes by different names and different years?
No. My personality is such that I'm probably somewhat of a loner.
Mm-hmm.
And although I respect my other women, I will work with them. I see them as a colleague. I don't see them as women or men. And I see our issues as issues, and I don't see them as women or men's issues. I see them as people issues. Mm-hmm. And I'm not real comfortable in a large group of women. I'm not comfortable. I'm not one that every time I go shopping I'm going to take some other body with me. That's just not me.
Mm-hmm. So you work better alone. Yeah, well that's good. It's surprising how that...
It's a bit surprising to me as the new women have come in, and of course we were kind of, not just in the Senate, in the House too, and I would always go to the receptions in the evening, which was hard for me at first. All the men had their wives there. And I would notice that the few women that were there would tend to come in together, stand together, talk together, and leave. And then as they started coming over trying to get me in the group, it was a challenge for me. I don't want this. It's nice to talk for a few minutes, but I want to circulate. I want to be available to these people, and I can only do that by myself because I know when the comfort level is gone and move on. And now I see they're doing it much more easily, but it was very evident.
Do you think that was because there was such a small number of women? Just sort of
I think it was a foreign way of reacting in the social, where they probably had always been in social
that's
arenas with their husband. That's the way I viewed it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that's a difference or a change. Do you have any particularly vivid memories of any specific incidences, victories, defeats, most embarrassing moments, most exciting moments?
I remember the first bill I was assigned to carry. Now as I look back, a little button-up bill. I was so frightened and apprehensive about all the questions they were going to ask me. And I remember I asked to pass over the bill the first day. And Senator Talkington said, "All right," and he put it back on the calendar, and a couple of days later, and so I asked to pass over the bill again. And he looked at me and he grinned, and he said, "That's approved." And the third time it came up, and I said, "I'm really sorry to delay, but I need to pass over this bill again." And he says, "We can't do that, Senator." And he made me, getting up the first time, and nobody really asked any questions, so they're paying attention to what I was saying, I had done so much homework on that, you can't believe.
No one.
So that was the time when I was really got, I guess, victories. Yeah, one of the things that was a little victory, I call a little victory, but to me it was kind of the first time of being successful, because they keep you from being successful very much. You don't want to get too many victories. But they had taken out some money from the Kansas Advocacy and Protective Services appropriations, and it wasn't very much money, like $25,000. That's in the early years when we still had, and it was for some not expansion, but just to maintain some of the services to the people who needed to be protected and advocated for. And it made me furious. I serve on that board. Thank you. And so I stood up and offered the amendment on the floor. And I had talk to the chair beforehand, and he says, if you want to do it, do it. And Ross was in the chair that time. And they put it back in.
Oh, for goodness sake.
It was a tiddly bit, you know. But my gosh, they really, you know. And I've got some other things I passed, but those are the kind of things.
Yeah.
And I think can I tell you one of the most embarrassing things that happened on the floor? I was new, and I'm sitting down there with Senator Hayden, and he's rare. And I get this telephone call from one of the senators behind me, and he says, Norma, he says, you know, we're both up there on the floor together, and he says, I feel really comfortable talking to you, and he says, do you see that woman up there in the balcony, sitting there kind of in the third row? And I said, well, yes. And he said, you know, he said, I've got a real problem. And I said, well, what's the matter, Tom? He said, well, this woman, she just won't leave me alone. She's just all over me all the time. And here my face is getting red and red. He says, I don't know what to do about it. He says, I've just never had anything like this before. And I said, well, Tom, why don't you just tell her that you're married and that you just feel like that's inappropriate? And he said, well, I don't think she'd accept that. And I said, well, you know, you're going to have to deal with this in a certain way. And he says, I want you to meet my wife. That's her. And here are all these guys sitting around him. You know, here was my face going like
They're
this.
watching.
And I said, oh gosh.
Oh yeah. Well, that's a fun times when you get how you get to know people.
That kind of was because he really was dramatic about it, you know.
Oh, I'm going to ask you a few questions now about yourself. We've already kind of talked a little bit about your family, but are you a native of Kansas?
I was born in Yates Center, Kansas, but I was raised in Kansas City, Missouri.
Oh, you were? So you did go to school in Kansas City, Missouri?
Kansas City, Missouri.
Can you describe your childhood and growing up and going to school? What kind of a community was it you lived in?
Big, of course. Kansas City, Missouri is big. And went to uphill grade school, where the discipline was very strong, and homework was a big part of that. And then I went to a medium-sized high school for that time. It wasn't a big one, and again it was Parochial High School. However, I graduated from public high school that was nearer our home. The last year was there.
What high school did you?
Southeast.
Did you debate or anything in high school?
No. No, I did not.
What kind of activities did you engage in?
Well, I love sports, and I was a straight A student for the most part. I worked after school. And I didn't take part in a whole lot of extra activities. Even at that time, I felt a little bit as a loner. I wasn't particularly wanting to be involved with the cheerleader type. I didn't fit that. I'm not one that strives for the limelight. I don't like the limelight. And the others, of course, we were friends, but we didn't do a lot of running around because I worked.
What kind of work did you do?
I lived with the family and took care of their two little boys after school and on weekends. And simply because she needed help, or she thought she needed help, or she wanted help. But anyway, it was a time when I was earning my own way.
Did you have brothers and sisters growing up with you?
I had 4 sisters.
Oh my goodness.
And we were a working family. My father worked for the telephone company, which was good solid work with good benefits, but not real high salary at that time. And he had graduated from Fort Hays with honors from college, so he had the ability to work up into administration or leadership or boss or whatever you want to call it, executive level, which he did. But in the early years, it was a constant, steady thing. My mother stayed home with us. At that time, I was the only one that went on past high school.
Oh, where did you go to college?
Girls didn't do that.
Yeah.
Well, I went into nurse's training. At that time, it was a 3-year diploma program. However, during my 3rd year, we took a reciprocity in St. Louis, Missouri. We took a pediatrics, which is children, and psychiatry there because they had very large areas in their hospital, which our hospital did not in Kansas City at that time. And while I was there, I signed up at St. Louis University and took some English course.
Yes, we're going to get
Okay.
So I took St. Louis.
Yes, so I took English there. English 101 was my official college because all of our nurses' courses were taught in the hospital there by doctors and nurses. And then when I came back that summer, I enrolled at Rockhurst College, summer courses. At that time it was an all-male college, but in summer they allowed the co-ed. And I took more English, one second semester. Got a straight A in St. Louis and got a straight A at Rockhurst. And so, yeah, growing up, my sisters were my older sister was 2 years older, my younger sister 2 years younger, and then there was a skip of like 7 or 8 years, and there was another skip of like 8 years.
Oh my goodness.
And yeah.
So you're fairly spread out in age, weren't you?
But for my 4th sister, when my mother became pregnant with with number 4 in the family, her doctor said, you have to have an abortion because your heart will not take another delivery. And she said, I cannot do that. She said, if I have to do that, she said, I cannot kill my baby for me to live. And so she carried my little sister Carolyn all the way through, had an uneventful delivery, and then she carried my next little sister.
Oh my goodness!
With no problems. And she said, I guess I did the right thing.
Yes.
So
that's quite a story, really. That's unusual. Well, were even though you were apart in age, were you close to your sisters, and did you do
my older sister and I had some problems, I think. Maybe her, the firstborn and the secondborn. Firstborn tried to play mother all the time, and she didn't need to. My mom was there all the time, and she has quite a streak in her, which has become more pronounced in her older years. I think from the time she was 35 or 40, I began to see it. She's very jealous. And it bothers her when one of her sisters gets something, and then she has to top it off. But my next younger sister, Shirley, was 2 years younger than I am. We still, good friends. And,
but she doesn't live around here? Or?
She lives in Minnesota.
So none of them campaigned for you?
Oh, no.
Or were around to?
Oh, no. No.
Now, are your parents still living?
No.
So they don't know about your being elected? Or
well, yes, they do. My dad does. My mother died about 20 years ago, 22 I think it was. She died quite young, age of 56. She had diphtheria as a child, and it really had damaged the valves of her heart. And my dad passed away just about 4 years ago, and I was able, while he had come to visit me, to bring him up during a summer committee, which was just going to last a half day, and show him around. But he was sitting in my chair, and he couldn't believe it, because he kind of had the attitude, I think, that I did. Norma, you don't belong in that dirty game. Norma, you just don't belong with those double crossers,
Yes.
And I kept saying, Dad, there's room for all of us. And the people, we need to establish some credibility among the people. And if good people don't do anything.
Well, that was nice. Did he, do you think, support your decision to run, or did you consult him?
He did. After he'd been up here, he sent me money for my campaign, and then he sent me money for my next campaign, and so yeah, he was very, very proud. Very proud.
Now, you haven't mentioned much. Can you dance for that, or?
May I? You want to stop it?
Go ahead.
Just a minute.
Sure. Okay, you mentioned going becoming a nurse and everything, but you never mentioned being a nurse. Did you work as a nurse? Okay.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I did, and I loved it. I worked as birth room supervisor in Kansas City, Missouri, a couple of years, and then my last year and a half before I got married, I was asked to take the position of superintendent of nurses at the Jackson County Hospital, which was a hospital that had a care home connected with it, with those people like on SRS that needed full-time long-term care. And some of them were seniors, but some of them were not. Some were just chronic with no money. And so not only did I have the hospital, but I also saw to it that these people were receiving the kind of care they should. And so I did that for, it was close to a year and a half before I got married.
And did you quit working then?
Well, when I got married, we moved to Wichita. He was interning at Wichita. He's an MD. And so we moved to Wichita, and I went to work in the birth rooms at Wichita, St. Francis Hospital, and worked there until the 1st of June, and he was due to finish his internship the 1st of July. And the reason I quit was because he came down with a very severe case of meningoencephalitis, which was meningitis with encephalitis.
Oh my goodness.
And he was running a really high fever, and his spinal fluid was really bad, and they finally diagnosed it as mumps, encephalomeningitis. And the report came back from the CDC down in Georgia, and I could not work in birth rooms and still have any contact with him, and I quit. And then we moved to Valley Center and set up practice there, and we've been so blessed because he has been left with no problems at all except a lack of coordination between brain and foot on the dance floor. That sounds terrible, but he really is a genius, and he's a tremendous diagnostician, and we think so often of the many times that people have this and are left as very incapable mentally.
My goodness.
And he's just finishing his medical school, and he comes from a low-income family, and had worked very hard to get through school, and he and his brother, and that's all there was.
Well, that's kind of exciting. Yeah. Well, then you had children really quick.
Well,
I mean, a lot in it really quick.
Yes,
in
we
a few
did.
years.
I remember we got married in November and moved down here, and of course the following June was when he got sick. And clear up from December until June, I kept saying, I don't know why I can't get pregnant. I don't know why.
Can I ask her just a question?
Sure, go ahead.
You want to turn the
I'm sorry.
It's Senator Francisco.
Now, so he was sick for how long?
He was really sick for just about a month because he was just released the last of June, and we moved right away to Valley Center. So at that time, then we began setting up an office, and I helped him, and then I got pregnant. Probably was pregnant when he was sick and didn't know it. But our firstborn was born in the following January, and our second one then was born the following April 27th, and our third one was born the following April 25th.
Oh my goodness.
So they were both the same age for 2 days. They're both the same age today, and just kind of went on from there.
You didn't work while your children?
No, I didn't. When I got
that many children.
When I got ready to have the baby, I quit helping him in the office, and I did, of course, all the office laundry, and I did all of at that time. We had to wash the syringes and the gloves and sterilize them.
Oh, you were still working in his office then?
Well, not in his office. I was doing at home. See, his office was just 6 blocks from home in a small community. So he'd bring all the dirty syringes and all the dirty gloves and the laundry, and I'd wash them and sterilize them and clean them and send them back.
You have how many children?
Seven, yeah.
Now, you have daughters and sons?
I have 6 daughters and one son.
And how old is your son? Where does he fit in?
He is next to the last live one that we have. He's number 6. Our daughters range from, let's see, age 35, 33, and then we miss 32, and then there's 31 and 30, and then we miss 29. So he's 28, and our youngest is 27.
Oh my goodness.
So
I bet they have a lot of fun when they get together.
We had 5 kids at K-State one year.
Oh my goodness.
Felt like we bought a piece of the rock.
You did.
My husband graduated from KU Med School. I had 5 kids at K-State in 1 year, and I represent Wichita State U in my district. So if you don't think that's a balancing act.
And a lot of loyalties there.
Oh, yes.
A lot of investments.
And I can't say that, you see, the one thing is everyone assumes, what college did you graduate from? I did not.
That's true if you have a nursing, unless you...
I did not. I have a diploma. And I went through at the time when you wanted to be gone overnight, you signed out and your parents gave you permission. And you did all the procedures yourself, and you fluffed those pillows, and you gave those back rubs, and you carried the stitch tray to take the stitches out, and you made sure that everything was on there, and you assisted in surgery, and you did the after you put the tubes down and everything else, which they don't do now.
It was really a different time.
My time was a time when I touched the patient. That's what I loved.
Did you go back to nursing at all? You didn't have time then after you...
No, I really haven't had time. I kept my continuing education up so that I could retain my license all those years, and we're required to. But I volunteered with the blood mobile, with the school hearing tests, with the school eye tests, all of the health ways that I could utilize the skills I had. I was continuing volunteering someplace to utilize those. And
well, that's interesting. That's good that you have the skill to do that, help in that way. How do you feel that your being in the legislature affected your family, your children, and your husband?
I think they're very proud. And I think that because they're just absolutely my greatest cheerleaders. And
you say they campaigned with you and helped you
yes,
in the campaigns?
Absolutely, especially the last one in '88, because I had an accident downstairs here, and I was bedfast from the 30th day of June until the 15th of August.
Oh my goodness.
I could not get up, and
that's right during the campaign?
It's a good thing I didn't have a primary.
Yeah.
Because I didn't, and that was against Davy Crockett. And everybody kept saying, where are you, where are you, where are you, we're not seeing you, you've got to get out. Finally, when I did get out, you can imagine how weak I was. I mean, being down that long.
Goodness.
It's pretty bad.
Pretty tough way to get elected, too. You have to approach it from there. Now, we talked about a little bit about what you did in high school, but did you belong to any women's organizations or any organizations that may have contributed to your wanting to be in the Senate, or that may have contributed in preparing you for just your other experience in public office?
I don't know what it would have been. I belonged to the Latin Club in high school. I think I was an officer. I graduated I was in the Honor Society. When I got into nurses training, I was class president my freshman and my second year. My third year, my duties that I was going to be assigned were heavy. They nominated me, and I asked to let someone else do it. Trying to think if there was anything else.
You did Girl Scouts. You were Girl Scout leader and a Boy Scout
leader. And helped with Boy Scouts. Helped with most of the things at school.
Did you belong to any other organizations?
Well, outside just social little things, I belong to a little club called Sit and Chats. And let's see, not really during that time. I belonged to the Medical Society Auxiliary, but I didn't hardly ever go. My focus during those years was child raising and homemaking, preparing my kids to fly on their own. And I just had my hands full.
Well, sure. Anyone would. What do you think will be your major contribution to the Kansas and to the legislature, maybe? Or what has
This might sound. I hope it doesn't sound bad, but as I think of over the years what I have contributed are several things. Number one, I think I'm known by my colleagues as being a senator who always does her homework. Number two, I'm not real talkative in a lot of committees, but I tend to see the long-term impact rather than the Band-Aid treatment. As I look at things and look at proposals, I would say probably I have been able to, maybe this isn't good, but I have been able to either stop or correct many bills, change the focus of them, that were going to be Band-Aid solutions and be disastrous in a couple of years, either financially or to the people. I have been able to either change direction or stop them completely. And I think that is a positive thing because I just tend to see the long term and the broader picture. Sometimes people get explaining things and they're just looking in one direction. I'm saying, but it would fit this situation. How would that impact that? Well, we had talked about that. And I think that's one. And then the third thing I think I've been able to contribute is something that the news media has repeatedly used. And they refer to me as the conscience of the Senate.
Very nice. That's a nice
whether it's tongue-in-cheek or whatever, but they have told me, in all seriousness and sincerity, individually, you bring something that no one else brings. Conscience.
No, that's a nice.
So I don't want to sound.
No, I think you would know better. You would be able to evaluate this better.
Well, sometimes it's hard to bring that.
Well, it's hard to know that till you really can look back on it more. You're still participating in it.
I do want to tell you about something that's my most treasured recognition I think I've ever gotten. And that was after my first year in the Senate. I came back from lunch. It was at the end of the session. I came back from lunch. Here was this beautiful peace rose lying on my desk. Real look, bloomed about that big. And then there was the scroll rolled up. And what in the world is that? And I undid it. And it was a resolution form. It's like the official resolutions we run. Staff resolution number 1. And it went on just like a resolution, and it said even though she's soft-spoken, she can change the course of debate from the strongest senator. Even though she's the mother of 7, her yard work is one of her favorite things. How they put that, she can mow her yard as well as mow down the opposition in grand style, something like that. But it was all just personal things, and it was signed by every staff member in the Senate, the doorman, the secretary, and then they had a statement on it that this resolution has been drawn up during our lunch hour and has not consumed any state time. And I had it framed, and it's my most treasured possession.
Well, that's quite a compliment.
So I just...
Yeah, that's... let's see. Do you think that being in the state legislatures changed you as a person?
Yes,
Okay.
I do. I have grown a lot in a lot of ways. I'm more confident in expressing perhaps my contrary opinions to what's being said. I don't like to argue at all. I don't feel I need to, but I feel at ease in expressing the opposite point of view. The more I learn, and this is a very learning process and continues to be, the more I learn, the more humble I become about all the things I don't know. The more I learn, the more I want to learn, and the more I realize I don't know. And I think there's not a day that goes by that I don't wonder in what way or why things have happened to put me where I am. I have a very basic attitude that personally, I guess maybe it's a spiritual attitude that maybe you know the song, that whatever is God's will, just help me to accept it. Because I would never have chosen to do this. And sometimes I don't even, I question, why are you here?
Well, it's kind of unusual what you said made you decide each time to run, too.
It's
totally different than most people that think about it and plan on it and everything and want it or something. Do you think that there were any negatives for you, your family, your husband and you? Yeah. You mentioned money. That's the most material thing, but I think it has taken a lot of constant remembering that when you're away from your family like this, you have to work extra hard to make sure communication is maintained, understanding and closeness is maintained, and be sensitive from a distance about the times when perhaps your husband might feel very alone, more alone but never expressing it. That your kids maybe just need you there. They're grown, but they need to know that you're there. And am I missing that? The other thing that I think bothers me a lot is that I'm one that has always, if a neighbor is sick, a bowl of soup goes over. I can't do that. I can't do that anymore. So
those
the little things,
little things, but to me they're very important things.
Is there anything I haven't asked you that you've thought of or would like to have included in this interview?
I don't think so. You pretty well covered everything. I love the work. I believe as my husband gets older, it's beginning to show a little more, although he is still, just gung-ho.
Is he? Yeah.
Just gung-ho. And I think I would like to say that it is getting very, very difficult as well as challenging to face the issues today that are becoming so linked to every other issue and the federal government, and to dedicate the time and the commitment to not only the issues in the actual legislative work, but to the constituents who are expecting more and more and more of you 24 hours a day. I find that in this job I have to be somewhat thick-skinned and never show it. That the bashing is going on, and yet inside no one goes without feeling it. But you don't show it to a great extent. I've never hung up on a person in my life. I don't intend to, but some of them do not deserve to be heard. And as you might know, people do tend to get on the phone where you can't see them and blast you forever. And they'll attack you personally, whether they're even living in your district or not.
And probably even more so if they aren't living in your district.
Yes, they
you may not know it at the time.
They really do. And I think it's extremely interesting that you are doing this with women who are in the legislature, and have been, because I would be interested to see how many women are feeling the same way that I do.
That's what several people have said too. And it is interesting to us because we find there's certain, well, there are maybe 2 or 3 different ways that people really approach, the women approach being in the legislature. And of course there are different lifestyles, and some have children, some don't. And
I think the legislature is very hard on marriages.
But maybe not for the women as much as the men.
I noticed that with men. It's very hard.
I'm not sure it is with the women as much as the men.
It's if you come from a strong family with strong family ties, and you're up in years. I quite frankly don't know how I would have handled it if I would have had a small baby to have to take care of them. We had 3 babies last year in this
Actually,
legislature.
you had 4.
4. Yeah, that's right. And I absolutely...
It's a different experience for those people.
Well, and this is not the place for a baby. And this really does take some years of living to understand wisely what's going on, I think. And I obviously do not think that the floor of the House or the floor of the Senate is any place for children during work hours. I think that is totally inappropriate. And of course that may brand me as an anti-woman woman, but no other company would allow a woman to sit at the front desk and nurse her baby during hours, office hours, with other people around. They simply wouldn't do it, and I don't think it's appropriate here, and it's been extremely embarrassing to many, many, many people.
I think that's a good point. I think that, I'll be sure we get that. And you were just discussing what clubs you belong to.
Right. At the present time, I belong to the American Nurses Association and the State Nurses Association. I belong to the Progressive Women's Club, which is one of the Federated Women's Clubs. I belong to, I just dropped my membership in Business and Professional Women's because I just couldn't make it to the meetings. I belong to the Sedgwick County Medical Auxiliary. I belong to, this is another one I think. I guess we'll stop there.
Okay.
That's just...
That's